Did you know the United States has tried to conquer Canada not once, but multiple times? And every single time, it's failed. It's a fascinating story of ambition, miscalculation, and the sheer grit of the people living north of the border. Let's dive into why America's northern expansion dreams never came true. The very first attempt happened right at the birth of the United States. During the American Revolutionary War in 1775, the Continental Congress believed that the French-speaking Canadians in Quebec would eagerly join their fight against British rule. They sent an army north, led by Benedict Arnold and Richard Montgomery, thinking they'd be welcomed as liberators. They couldn't have been more wrong. The Americans severely underestimated the situation. The Quebecois were wary of the anti-Catholic sentiment prevalent in the American colonies, and the British had actually granted them significant religious and cultural freedoms with the Quebec Act of 1774. So, instead of a warm welcome, the American forces were met with suspicion and resistance. The invasion culminated in the disastrous Battle of Quebec, where Montgomery was killed and Arnold was wounded. The starving, freezing American army was eventually forced into a humiliating retreat. Attempt number 1, a total failure. Fast forward to the War of 1812. This was America's biggest and best shot at conquering its northern neighbor. The U.S. was angry about British interference with their shipping and the impressment of American sailors. A popular slogan at the time was "On to Canada," and many American leaders, including Thomas Jefferson, believed capturing it would be a mere matter of marching. They thought the Canadian colonists, many of whom were recent American immigrants, would switch sides. Once again, they misjudged the situation completely. What the Americans failed to grasp was that invading Canada meant fighting the full might of the British Empire, the world's reigning superpower. The British had a professional, well-trained army and the unbeatable Royal Navy, controlling the seas and the Great Lakes. But it wasn't just the British regulars. The defense of Canada was a combined effort. Canadian militia, made up of farmers and townspeople, fought fiercely to protect their homes. And critically, indigenous nations like the Shawnee, led by the legendary warrior Tecumseh, allied with the British, seeing them as the lesser of two evils compared to the land-hungry Americans. The U.S. invasion plan was a mess from the start. They launched a three-pronged attack that was poorly coordinated and led by aging, incompetent generals from the Revolutionary War. The attacks across the border at Detroit, Niagara, and Montreal all faltered. The Americans did manage to burn down York, which is modern-day Toronto, but this only strengthened Canadian resolve. In retaliation, the British famously marched on Washington, D.C. and burned the White House. By the end of the war, not a single inch of Canadian territory had been permanently occupied by the U.S. In fact, the war helped forge a distinct Canadian identity, uniting French and English speakers against a common enemy. So, what about after 1812? Were there other attempts? Well, not direct invasions, but there were some strange moments. In the 1830s, a few small chaotic rebellions broke out in Canada against British rule. Some enthusiastic Americans formed secret societies and launched raids across the border to liberate Canada, but these were unofficial and quickly crushed. Then, after the Civil War, a group of Irish-American veterans known as the Fenians decided the best way to free Ireland from British rule was to capture Canada and hold it hostage. They launched a series of raids between 1866 and 1871, but these two were poorly organized and easily defeated by Canadian militia and British forces. These failed raids actually had the opposite effect of what the Fenians wanted. They highlighted the need for a stronger, unified defense and pushed the separate British colonies in North America to come together. In 1867, the Dominion of Canada was formed, partly as a direct response to the threat of American expansionism. A united Canada, still under the protection of the British Empire, was a much harder target. Ultimately, the combination of British military power, the fierce resistance of the Canadian people, and key alliances with indigenous nations created a defense that the United States could never overcome. The dream of manifest destiny stretching to the North Pole was stopped dead in its tracks at the Canadian border. It's a powerful reminder that history is often shaped not by the grandest ambitions, but by the determination of people defending their land and way of life. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time.